You may know Tamron Hall from her role as host of MSNBC's NewsNation, but you may not know that her life was shattered by domestic violence. She opens up to iVillage about the murder of her older sister in 2004.
And in fact, the last night my mother spoke with my sister, she called my mother and said, listen, this relationship isn't working. I'm going to venture out on my own. I think he's holding me back. There are things that I want in life, that I see in life, that he doesn't share. He's happy, you know, with whatever the situation was with their personal life. And she wanted to break free. And my mother said, you know what, you have to do what you think is right. You can love someone, but that person not be the person for you. My parents were not the type that say, you know, you stay there to the end. I mean, my mother, it gave her the advice that she shared. And then the next morning, the phone call came to me. It was a Sunday morning. I was in my bedroom living in Chicago, and my mother called and I said, hello. And I heard this scream, this like, it was unimaginable scream from my mom. And she said, call your father, call your father, call your father. Something's happened to Renata. I said, okay, Mom. She was on her way to church. And I called my dad, and my dad, ever so, you know, steady, said, baby? He called, this guy called and says that Renata is dead. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I don't know, can you call for Dad and figure out what's going on? Just, can you call for me? And I called the home, he answered. And I said, what's going on? And he said, well, we're not sure. Renata was found in the pool, dead. Okay, what? My sister is the most amazing swimmer. She was speaking with my mother the night before, and now you're telling me that she's face down in a pool and there are police there. What are they saying? He was very vague, very, you know, just kind of all over the place. And I called a friend who worked for a local television station, and I said, can you find out what's going on? Who do you know? Who can you call? And he made a call for me, and he called me back and he said, the homicide detectives are at your sister's house. Homicide detective. So as we continued and we got in contact with the detectives involved, they said, your sister was murdered. We don't know if someone broke in the back of the house, but there's a gate and there's no entry point. There's nothing suspicious there. All of her nails were broken, her hair pulled out, and then her spouse started telling these strange stories of maybe the dog tried to pull her out of the pool. It just started to sound like a made-up, you know, television movie, you know. And then the detective finally said, he did it. We know he did it, but we have to prove it. And there's the problem, because his DNA can be explained on her body and in the home. They interrogated him countless numbers of times, and he was never charged. Never charged. My mother suspects that he overheard the conversation of her saying she wanted to leave. And maybe she'd said it before, we don't know, but that perhaps was the fuel that needed.
You think it affected your dad?
Oh.
Right.
My dad was never the same. I know my dad loved me and loved my other siblings.
Of course.
But there was a special bond he had with my sister. And my mother spent the next few years trying to encourage my dad to have a life and to do things, and it just never, he just never recovered from it.
Tamron first wrote about her family's loss last year in a moving piece on thegrio.com.
When I first decided to talk about my sister's murder and her history with her spouse, I called my mother and I said, you know, thinking about telling, what do you think? And I said, I feel bad. Dad is not here. I can't ask his permission. What do you think? And she said, absolutely. Your dad would be proud of you, and maybe this will save a life. I didn't want to be, you know, one of those voices, again, another public figure with what happened to their family kind of situation. But my mother said it is the right thing to do. And it opened up the sadness, but it gave us a sense of empowerment. And that's what I tell the girls with Day One or any of the other young women who've approached me, even on their own, to talk about domestic violence. It is a sense of power and that you have a voice.
Tamron now works with Day One, a New York City-based group focused on teen dating violence.
The most immediate goal that I have is to expose as many young girls as possible to Day One, to their message, or if it's not Day One, another organization that is there to let them know that when he text messages you 15 times that night because you didn't answer his call, that's a problem.
For anyone who's watching who may be in an abusive relationship, what would be your advice? What's your message to them?
Well, the simple word would be leave, but obviously it's more complex to that when you have children, when you may be held financially hostage, where this person controls the purse strings. I think it is important to find one person that you can go to and open up your heart and your mind to that person. We're stronger when we stand with someone. There are people who are willing to stand with you and hold your hand in court, if it comes to that, in finding a new home, in finding a school for your child, and if needed, a temporary place to call home, a shelter for you and your children. But there is somebody there willing to stand with you. You just have to open up your heart and tell them.